Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, January 30th, 2025. President Donald Trump calls for a moment of silence and speaks of the country's hour of anguish following Wednesday night's midair collision over the Potomac River in Washington between an Army Blackhawk helicopter and an American Airlines passenger plane. 3 soldiers and 64 passengers and crew, all believed to have been killed. President Trump also suggesting the blame for the tragedy is diversity initiatives at the Federal Aviation Administration, promoted by Democratic administrations, that led to lower standards when hiring for air traffic controllers. 3 of the president's cabinet nominees having Senate confirmation hearings today. Tulsi Gabbard, up for Director of National Intelligence, asked about her past comments praising whistleblower Edward Snowden and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and her meeting with former Syrian leader Bashaar al-Assad. FBI Director nominee Kash Patel gets questioned about whether he would seek to prosecute President Trump's political enemies and whether the president was right to pardon the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol defendants convicted of assaulting police officers. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., nominee for Health Secretary, asked for a second day about whether he thinks vaccines are safe. The Senate Budget Committee approves the White House Budget Director nominee Russell vote 11-0, with Republicans only voting, all Democrats boycotting the meeting. Reuters reports that President Donald Trump implied, without evidence, federal diversity efforts were at fault on Thursday after a regional jet crashed into a U.S. Army helicopter at a Washington airport, killing 67 people in the deadliest U.S. air disaster in more than 20 years. The investigation into the crash in the nation's capital had just begun, and it was not yet clear why the American Airlines bombardier carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members collided with the Army Blackhawk helicopter as it prepared to land at Reagan Washington National Airport. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said both aircraft had been flying standard flight patterns and there had been no breakdown in communication. Passengers on the flight included ice skaters, family, and coaches returning from a training camp in Wichita, Kansas. Reporting from Reuters. President Trump held a news conference in the White House briefing room. We'll get to his comments about DEI in just a moment. He began by saying that there are not expected to be any survivors in this crash, and the nation expresses its sorrow.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly, and we are a country of we are in mourning. This has really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent, some very talented people, unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers.
President Donald Trump in the White House briefing room. Former President Joe Biden posting on X on behalf of himself and former First Lady Jill Biden. Jill and I are praying for the families of the victims who tragically lost their lives in the plane and helicopter crash near DCA. We are immensely grateful to the brave first responders and emergency personnel on the scene. Later in his opening statement, President Trump accused former Democratic presidents of lowering air traffic controller hiring standards and said the Federal Aviation Administration's diversity initiatives could have led to this tragic event.
So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration. This was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target, and you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway.
President Trump in the White House briefing room. There was an article at Fox News dated January 14, 2024, about the FAA's diversity language, and it has this paragraph: when asked for comment on the initiative, including what roles people with disabilities could fulfill, the FAA told Fox News Digital that the agency thoroughly seeks and vets qualified candidates from as many sources as possible for a range of positions. The FAA employs tens of thousands of people for a wide range of positions, from administrative roles to oversight and execution of crucial safety functions. Like many large employers, the agency proactively seeks qualified candidates from as many sources as possible, all of whom must meet rigorous qualifications. That, of course, will vary by position, the FAA said. That was from the Fox News article, January 14th, 2024. President Trump at his news conference also called out by name former Transportation Secretary in the Biden administration, Pete Buttigieg, who responded on X: "Despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had zero commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch." President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again. That post from Pete Buttigieg, former Transportation Secretary. The current Transportation Secretary, who was sworn in just a couple of days ago, Sean Duffy, joined Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth in the White House briefing with the president, and both made remarks. And they both, like the president, referred to FAA hiring standards.
When we deal with safety, we can only accept the best and the brightest in positions of safety that impact the lives of our loved ones, our family members. And I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President. That is the motto of your presidency, the best and the brightest, the most intelligent coming into these spaces. I want to take a moment and extend my condolences to the families of the loved ones. We commit to them that we are going to get to the bottom of this investigation, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but as quickly as possible, with the NTSB, who is here today, as well as the FAA. What happened yesterday shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And when Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination. That didn't happen yesterday. That's unacceptable. And so we will not accept excuses. We will not accept passing the buck. We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to make sure we have the reforms that have been dictated by President Trump in place to make sure that these mistakes do not happen again. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership, Mr. President, and I appreciate the confidence you placed in me. Thank you.
Pete, would you like to say something?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Again, I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary said about your leadership. From the moment we found out about this, we were in contact with the White House trying to determine exactly what happened. I would echo it as well. No excuses. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We first and foremost, from the Defense Department, want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls and their families that were affected by this. Never should happen. And certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, a young captain, staff sergeant, and a CW2, Chief Warrant Officer, on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission. The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. And I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DOD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top-tier aviation assets inside the DOD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable. But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DOD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible, whether it's flying Blackhawks and flying airplanes, leading platoons, or in government. The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control, or whether it's in our generals, or whether it's throughout government. So thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir, and we'll stand by you on it. Thank you.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy with President Donald Trump in the White House briefing room. Secretary Hegseth put out a video earlier obtained by Fox News saying the helicopter had a fairly experienced crew using night vision goggles. The helicopter was from the 12th Aviation Battalion based at Fort Belvoir in Virginia. Secretary Hegseth said the unit would be grounded for 48 hours in an operational pause. President Trump also announcing today he's appointing the FAA Deputy Administrator Christopher Rochelot to be acting administrator, saying that Rochelot is a 22-year veteran of the agency and highly respected. After all the opening statements at the White House, President Trump answered reporters' questions, and many were about his claims that DEI could have led to this crash.
President, you have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the other things I will tell you is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system. And then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have. But they didn't build the systems properly. They spent a lot of money renovating a system, spending much more money than they would have spent if they bought a new system for air traffic controllers, meaning the computerized systems. There are certain companies that do a very good job. They didn't use those companies. They used companies that should not have been doing it. No, I think it's very important to understand that for some jobs, and not only this, but air traffic controllers, they have to be at the highest level of genius. Okay.
I want to ask you about the ice skaters in a moment because the U.S. ice skating community was affected. But first, if I can, the cited FAA text that you read is real, but the implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's
Who said
website.
That, you?
No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the entirety.
What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in, and he changed it. And then when I came in 3 days ago, I signed a new order, bringing it to the highest level of intelligence. Okay.
It was on the website.
President Donald Trump at a news conference in the White House briefing room. On Capitol Hill, the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke about last night's crash and also what President Trump has said about the possible cause.
This morning, our hearts go out to everyone impacted by the horrible, heartbreaking incident at Reagan Washington National Airport last night. I've been briefed on the horrific incident at DCA and have continued to monitor the situation. My heart goes out to everyone who was impacted by this incident. I'm praying for the victims, their families, and our brave first responders as we monitor the situation. But I have to tell you, I just watched President Trump's news conference. Listen, it's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracies. It's another for the President of the United States to throw out idle speculation as bodies are still being recovered and families are still notified. It just turns your stomach. In the meantime, we are keeping the families and loved ones of the victims in our prayers, and we are keeping our brave first responders in our prayers as well.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. The chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, Jennifer Homendy, led a news conference at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport about the investigation. Reporters asked her about President Trump's remarks on DEI and the FAA, and also about whether the flight data recorders, the black boxes, have been recovered.
James Matthews from Sky News. So we've heard from President Trump today talking about DEI hiring policies within the FAA and associating that with the cause of this accident. What do you say to that?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't hear the remarks. I was briefing House and Senate members, but I believe, Chair, would you like to take that?
As part of any investigation, we look at the human, the machine, and the environment. So we will look at all the humans that were involved in this accident. Again, we will look at the aircraft, we will look at the helicopter, we will look at the environment in which they were operating in. That is standard in any part of our investigation. I'll turn it back.
Chair, can I ask you, has the flight data recorder been recovered yet? And what is the difficulty in a water disaster like this, which presents a very difficult environment for your investigators and the people out on the water right now?
Well, the question was on the flight data recorders, and we have not recovered the flight data recorders yet. We know they're there. They are underwater. This is not unusual for the NTSB. We have many times recovered flight data recorders in water. We have our lab right here that is about a mile from the NTSB, so it's not unusual. And once we get those, we'll be able to get those read and information from them to be able to provide further information to you.
Jennifer Homendy, chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, at a news conference at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. The Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem posting photos on the scene on X with the caption, "Our Coast Guard saw the collision and immediately responded. Our cutter was the first boat on the scene of the tragic DCA plane crash. This morning I went to Joint Base Anacostia Bowling first thing to see the rescue and recovery operations from the water and offer all resources of the Department of Homeland Security to help support multiple agencies and first responders. Please pray for the families and all the victims and the safety of all those involved." Also, Associated Press reporting that staffing was not normal in the air traffic control tower at DCA at the time of the mid-air collision. A preliminary FAA report obtained by AP says. And from NBC News, Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, told NBC that he was dreading in my heart that something like this crash would happen after the FAA bill that authorized 5 additional flights to Reagan was passed last May. While the senator said he was not yet ready to draw the connection between the bill and the crash, he noted he's always been concerned about congestion in the area. You're listening to Washington Today. From Reuters, former U.S. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, President Donald Trump's choice to be Director of National Intelligence, faced harsh criticism of her past defense of former NSA contractor Edward Snowden and comments seen as supportive of Russia. At a confirmation hearing on Thursday, both Republicans and Democrats have expressed doubts about the choice of Gabbard, a 43-year-old former Democrat and combat veteran without deep intelligence experience, to serve as the nation's top spy overseeing all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. Senators questioned Gabbard about views seen as echoing Russia's justification of the war against Ukraine, criticism of U.S. involvement in Syria, and 2017 meeting with Moscow-backed former Syrian President Bashaar al-Assad. That was from Reuters. Tulsi Gabbard, in her opening statement to the Senate Intelligence Committee, said U.S. intelligence has been politicized in the past, and that will end if she is confirmed.
For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq, based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers, millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran. Here are just a few other examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice, and yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation, specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end. President Trump's re-election is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, and begin to restore trust in those who've been charged with the critical task of securing our nation.
Tulsi Gabbard, nominated for Director of National Intelligence, part of her opening statement at today's hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Committee member Senator Michael Bennet, Democrat from Colorado, asked her about her views on Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
On February 23rd, 2022, at the very moment that Russian tanks were rolling across the peaceful border of Ukraine for the first time, you tweeted at 11:30 p.m. your time, "This war and suffering could have easily been avoided if Biden administration / NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine's becoming a member of NATO." Did you say that, yes or no?
I believe you're reading my tweet, Senator.
Yes is the answer. A few months later, you said on your podcast, and I quoted it, quote, "But this regime change war against Russia that the U.S. and NATO are waging via their proxy in Ukraine didn't begin when Putin invaded Ukraine. They had their eyes set on this objective long before that." Did you say that, yes or no?
I believe you're reading my tweet.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot
the answer
more.
Is yes.
You're quoting a podcast that provided much more
context. I'm happy to have a
context.
conversation with the chairman about whether I'm taking anything out of context. I don't think I am. And your answer is yes. Are you aware that your comments about proxy wars and Russia's legitimate security concerns, to quote your own words, are in alignment with what the Russians have said to justify their invasion of Ukraine? Yes or no?
Senator, I don't pay attention to Russian propaganda. My goal is to speak the truth, regardless of whether you like it or not.
I'll take it. That's fine. You said you are used to speaking truth to power.
Yes.
I'm shocked to hear you now say that, you are agreeing. I'm not shocked because I know you said it. You are agreeing that you basically said that Putin was justified in rolling over the peaceful border of Ukraine, the first time since World War II that a free nation had been invaded by a totalitarian state. And you were there at 11:30 p.m. that night to say that you were with them, not us. And let me tell you something. You say you don't know because you don't read Russian propaganda. Russian state TV then aired your comments. Did you know that?
Senator, I think you should also quote the statement that I made criticizing Putin for his invasion of Ukraine.
What I would say, Mr. Chairman, with the last, it's up to all of us. We're the Senate. We get to decide whether we're going to confirm this nominee. Obviously, we didn't select this nominee. But can't we do better than somebody who doesn't believe in 702? Can't we believe that somebody who can't answer whether Snowden was a traitor 5 times today, who made excuses for Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the first time that I'm aware of any American official has done that? I'm questioning her judgment. That's the issue that's at stake here.
Senator Michael Bennet, Republican from Colorado, questioning Tulsi Gabbard, nominated for Director of National Intelligence, today's Senate Intelligence Committee hearing. A CBS News article about the hearing reads that Gabbard's nomination is in danger as she faces skepticism from senators over her decision to meet with Syrian dictator Bashaar al-Assad in 2017, her past push to pardon National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden, her comments about Russia's war in Ukraine, and her past opposition to renewing a key government surveillance authority known as Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Gabbard was questioned by Republicans and Democrats alike on her views of Snowden and whether she believes he was a traitor. She declined to say she believed he was a traitor, repeating that she felt he had broken the law and reiterating a point that she has made in the past, that he exposed practices that have resulted in the reform of 702. Reporting from CBS News, here is Senator James Lankford, Republican from Oklahoma, asking questions about Edward Snowden.
The concern among so many here, and I think what a lot of the folks in the intelligence community that you'd have the responsibility to oversight is, they want to hear that you also believe the same thing, that not just he broke the law, but that he's a traitor, because they don't want that to ever happen again. And all the sources that they had, that they trusted and that trusted them, now their lives were at risk. And all the programs that they had that were determined lawful all collapsed, and that intelligence then was gone, and the president didn't have access to a lot of information for decision making. So this is a big deal to everybody here because it's a big deal to everybody that you'll also oversee in that role as well. And so it's helpful for them to be able to hear your heart on this. So was Edward Snowden a traitor?
Senator, my heart is with my commitment to our Constitution and our nation's security.
Ours too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have shown throughout my almost 22 years of service in the military, as well as my time in Congress, how seriously I take the privilege of having access to classified information and our nation's secrets. And that's why I'm committed, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, to join you in making sure that there is no future Snowden-type leak. And I would do so by taking 4 specific actions. Number 1, again, to make sure that there are no illegal and unconstitutional programs. Limiting in a big way those who have access to our nation's top secrets through security clearance reform, making sure that every single person in the workforce knows about the legal whistleblower channels available to them, and making sure that there's a direct line available to me should anyone have concerns. If people choose to step outside of those legal channels to raise any concerns about programs or actions that exist within the intelligence community that are classified, there will be no excuse to do so, and they should be charged and prosecuted under the law.
Was he a traitor this time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
Tulsi Gabbard, nominee for Director of National Intelligence at a Senate Intelligence Committee confirmation hearing. Questions from James Langford, Republican from Oklahoma. The open portion of the hearing ran almost 3 hours. Committee Chair Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, said he planned to hold a vote on the nomination as soon as possible. The committee has 9 Republicans and 8 Democrats, and tie votes lose. So if all Democrats vote no, Tulsi Gabbard cannot afford any Republican no's and still be reported successfully from the committee to the full Senate. Washington today continues in a moment with FBI Director nominee Kash Patel testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea, it's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Kash Patel, writes the New York Times, tried to allay concerns about his fitness to serve as FBI director at his Senate confirmation hearing on Thursday by suggesting that he disagreed with President Trump's grants of clemency for violent January 6 rioters and seeking to distance himself from his own heated attacks on the Bureau. Mr. Patel, alternating between deference and defiance, eagerly echoed Republican senators' complaints about a politicized and weaponized FBI before pivoting to deflect intense Democratic questioning about his qualifications and temperament. He dismissed years of his own provocative public statements by claiming they were being mischaracterized in an effort to damage him, and claimed, remarkably, that he appeared on podcasts hosted by conspiracy theorists to debunk their views rather than endorse them. That was from the New York Times. Kash Patel served in the first Donald Trump presidential administration as a federal prosecutor and then chief of staff to the acting defense secretary and then senior advisor to the director of national intelligence. He testified today before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, asked him about investigations, prosecutions, and politics.
President Trump's made clear in public statements he wants to use the FBI to persecute political adversaries. He's publicly said that folks ranging from Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to former Vice President Harris should be investigated and criminally prosecuted. If President Trump were to order you to open an investigation into any of these individuals, let's say Vice President Harris, would you?
Senator, this question speaks directly to my ability to leave political bias and allow independent behavior to be the only guiding light. As a public defender, I learned that in the harshest of arenas. And any law enforcement investigation, if I'm confirmed at the FBI, will only be launched on the following qualification: a factual, articulable, legal basis to do so. The president has said publicly that he will allow the FBI to remain independent, and I have said as much as well.
So if FBI agents brought to you a factual legal basis, predication, and you are about to refer it to a prosecutor, and you get a call from the White House saying, don't proceed. This is a major donor. This is someone close to the president. This is inappropriate. What would you do?
Simple. I think you answered it partially in your question. The line agents, the brick agents who are trained to bring investigations on behalf of the FBI will make that decision-making process, and they will only have my full support so long as it upholds absolutely every value of the Constitution, and that's it.
So your predecessor, I went back and looked, and I asked the same questions of Director Comey and Director Wray. Director Wray, quoting former Attorney General Bell, said, "You should be willing to resign, if necessary, over conduct if you're pressed to engage in it that's unethical, illegal, or unconstitutional. If pressed by the president, would you resign?"
Senator, my answer is simply, I would never do anything unconstitutional or unlawful, and I never have in my 16 years of government service.
Would you be willing to resign the post of FBI director if pressed and given no choice but to obey the order or resign?
Senator, I will always obey the law.
Does obeying the law require you to, as Attorney General Bell said, as FBI Director Wray said, refuse the order or resign?
I'm not familiar with the extent of the law that you're referring to, but my answer is simple in my 16 years of government service. We will simply follow the law. And I've done that in Obama Justice Department, in Republican Justice Departments, in the Obama military, in Republican civilian capacity. I have never once wavered from my constitutional oath of office.
Mr. Patel, your predecessors in this role have been clear that they would be willing to resign if forced or directed to do something unethical or illegal. I'll proceed. One of your past statements that's concerned me, it's both a post on Truth Social and something you said in a podcast, the Sean Morgan report, that your predecessor, Chris Wray, has broken the law. We need to prosecute him. The FBI should go after people like him. And the month before this, in July 2023, you said there should be a criminal referral for FBI Director Wray. If confirmed, are you going to follow through on these previous statements that Director Wray needs to be prosecuted?
Senator, this reminds me of the conversation you and I had, which I greatly appreciated. There is enough violent crime in this country and enough national security threats to this country that the FBI is going to be busy going forward preventing 100,000 overdoses, 100,000 rapes, and 17,000 homicides.
We agree that prosecuting violent crimes should be the principal focus of the FBI. What I'm trying to get to, Mr. Patel, is a whole series of very troubling, to me and many other statements you've made about instead using it to pursue those who might be viewed as political opponents.
And as I told you in your office, I have no interest, no desire, and will not, if confirmed, go backwards. There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as the FBI director. I told you that in your office, and I'll tell you that again today.
Thank you for that statement.
Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, questioning FBI Director nominee Kash Patel at today's Judiciary Committee hearing. USA Today writing, Kash Patel broke with President Donald Trump at his confirmation hearing Thursday over commuting the sentences of January 6 defendants who committed violence against law enforcement. On his first day back in office, Donald Trump commuted the sentences of 14 individuals and pardoned all others who were convicted of crimes tied to the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Roughly 1,500 defendants faced charges tied to the attack when a mob of Trump supporters tried to disrupt proceedings for certifying then Vice President Joe Biden's 2020 election victory, sometimes by assaulting police officers. That was from the article at USA Today. Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, the committee's ranking member, asked Kash Patel about this.
Was President Donald Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to the January 6 defendants?
Thank you, Ranking Member. A couple of things on that. One, the power of the presidential pardon is just that, the president.
Alignment, I concede he has the authority. I'm asking, was he wrong to do it?
And as we discussed in our private meeting, Senator, I have always rejected any violence against law enforcement, and I have, including in that group, is specifically addressed any violence against law enforcement on January 6th, and I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
FBI Director nominee Kash Patel questioned by Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois. In a related issue, Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California and a former member of the House January 6th committee, asked the nominee about helping to produce and market a song, Justice for All, by the J6 prison choir that then presidential candidate Donald Trump played at his rallies. HuffPost article reads that Patel claimed he had no idea who the singers were, and the recording featured inmates of the District of Columbia Jail in March 2023. 17 of the 20 behind bars on the day of the recording were charged with assaulting police officers, with some already having been convicted. That was from HuffPost. Here's Senator Schiff and Kash Patel.
I want you to turn around. There are Capitol Police officers behind you. They're guarding us. Take a look at them right now. Turn around.
I'm looking at you. You're talking to me.
No, look at them. I want you to look at them if you can, if you have the courage to look them in the eye, Mr. Patel, and tell them you're proud of what you did. Tell them you're proud that you raised money off of people that assaulted their colleagues, that pepper sprayed them, that beat them with poles. Tell them you're proud of what you did, Mr. Patel. They're right there. They're guarding you today. Tell them how proud you are.
That's an abject lie, and you know it. I've never, ever accepted violence against law enforcement. I've worked with these men and women, as you know,
you glorified it in song,
and I did not make a single dime out of it.
In song. Well, let me.
How about you ask them if I have their backs, and let's see about that answer.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Patel. Let me ask you this. If an FBI director promoted a song of people who sprayed pepper spray in the face of an FBI agent, would you say they were fit to be director?
Mr. Schiff?
Yes or no? Would they be fit to be director?
I am fit to be the director of the FBI.
If you were the FBI director and you promoted a song with someone who beat an FBI agent with a pole, would you say you were fit to be FBI director?
Mr. Schiff, I am fit to be FBI director based on my 16 years of government service.
And yet you did all these things, Mr. Patel. You can say, oh, I support law enforcement, I decry violence against law enforcement. You could say all that. It's what you did, Mr. Patel, that matters. It's what you did that matters.
Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, and FBI Director nominee Kash Patel at today's Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearing. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, used his time questioning Kash Patel to focus on charges that Democrats weaponized the powers of government against Donald Trump through, for example, the investigation into allegations of Russia collusion with the 2016 Donald Trump presidential campaign.
This is the Nunes memo. You work for Mr. Nunes over on the House side? David Nunes?
Sorry?
Are you familiar with this memo by the Foreign Intelligence Service Act abuses
Yes.
the Department of Justice?
Absolutely.
Did you help write this memo?
I did as a staffer.
Okay, I'm going to put this in the record.
Thank you.
In this memo, you kind of dissected the abuses of Crossfire Hurricane, right?
I did, Senator.
And the Mueller investigation. So the Crossfire Hurricane investigators, two of them were Strzok and Page. Are you familiar with them?
I am, Senator.
Okay. It was opened up on July the 31st, 2016. And here's what Strzok said. And damn, this feels momentous because this matters. The other one did too. But that was to ensure we didn't F something up. This matters because this matters. So super glad to be on this voyage with you. That's to Page. And Page responds a couple of months later, he's not ever going to be President right, talking about Trump. Strzok, no, he won't. We'll stop it. Is it fair to say that the people in charge of investigating Crossfire Hurricane hated Trump's guts?
Well, you don't have to take my word for it. That statement, along with the statements from the sources.
Are those days over in the FBI, you hope?
Well, if they're not, they will be.
Okay, good. You know who Carter Page was?
I do, Senator.
Do you know that the FBI secured warrants against him on 4 different occasions?
Yes, Senator.
Do you know that the information that they relied upon came from the Steele dossier?
I do.
Was it you that were able to find out that the Steele dossier was a bunch of crap?
Yes, Senator. We followed the money, and we exposed the fraud that was the Steele dossier.
Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, questioning FBI Director nominee Kash Patel at today's Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearing. We covered it live on the C-SPAN networks. Runs over 5 hours in 2 parts. You can find the full video at cspan.org. From Associated Press, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s long record of doubting the safety of childhood vaccinations persisted as a flashpoint for him Thursday in a confirmation hearing where senators, including a key Republican, shared intensely personal details about the impact vaccine skepticism had on their lives. In one response, Kennedy refused to flatly reject a long discredited theory that vaccines cause autism, despite years of studies and research that have found they do not. His vaccine views could jeopardize his standing with just a few Republicans and has certainly not helped him win over any votes among Democrats in his bid to become health secretary. If all Democrats reject Kennedy's nomination, he can only afford to lose 3 Republican votes. Much attention was focused on the questions from Senator Bill Cassidy, the Republican chair of the Health Committee, who is also a physician. That was reporting from Associated Press. Here are the questions from Senator Cassidy to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You had once described yourself as pro-vaccine to me. Now, the context of what I'm about to ask is that there's multiple studies establishing the safety of measles and hepatitis B vaccine, and specifically that they are not a cause of autism. In this position, and you have previously said yes, but if you are approved to this decision, to this position, will you say unequivocally, will you reassure mothers unequivocally and without qualification that the measles and hepatitis B vaccines do not cause autism?
Senator, I am not going into the agency with any.
Well, that's kind of a yes or no question, because so if you're, because the data is there, and that's kind of a yes or no. And I don't mean to cut you off, but that really is a yes or no.
If the data is there, I will absolutely do that.
Now there is the data. Just because I used to do hepatitis B, as I've said, I know the data is there.
Well, then I will be the first person. If you show me data, I will be the first person to assure the American people that they need to take those vaccines.
Now, what concerns me is that you've cast doubt on some of these vaccines recently. I mean, like the last few years, but the data, and I can quote some of it. The data has been there for a long time. I've been out of the game. I've been in Congress for 16 years, and this data was in large measure generated before I came to Congress. So my concern is that if you were making those claims and being so influential, I mean, your bully pulp is incredible. With that responsibility, that you never acquainted yourself with anything that might contradict that what you were previously saying. So let me ask once more. If the data is brought to you, and these studies that have been out there for quite some time and have been peer-reviewed, and it shows that these 2 vaccines are not associated with autism, will you ask, no, I need even more? Or will you say, no, I see this, it's stood the test of time, and I unequivocally and without qualification say that this does not cause autism?
Not only will I do that, but I will apologize for any statements that misled people otherwise.
Thank you.
Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, questioning Health and Human Services Secretary nominee Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Associated Press article notes that the Department of Health and Human Services has a $1.7 trillion budget that oversees health care coverage, Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act marketplace for roughly half the country, approves, then recommends vaccines for deadly diseases, and conducts safety inspections of food and hospitals. Today's hearing was day 2 for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He testified Wednesday before the Senate Finance Committee, and it's that committee which will vote on whether to send his nomination to the full Senate. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Republican of New York, writing on X, I'm honored for this morning's bipartisan vote in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee supporting my nomination as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. I will continue to work through the Senate confirmation process to bring President Trump's America First peace through strength leadership to the UN. And from the Hill, Senate Republicans advanced the nomination of Russell Vought to lead the White House Budget Office as Democrats boycotted the meeting to protest the administration's recent efforts to freeze large swaths of federal funding. Republicans on the Senate Budget Committee voted 11-0 to report out Vought's nomination to lead the Office of Management and Budget. teeing it up for consideration by the full Senate. Budget Committee Chair Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, said he's hopeful the nomination heads to the full Senate for final approval soon. That was reporting from The Hill. While the Senate Budget Committee Republicans were voting, the Democrats on the committee held a news conference. Senator Patty Murray is from Washington State.
Over the last few days, American people have seen what putting Vote's radical plans into action look like. Mass chaos, mass confusion, and a whole lot of hurt for the American people. Because Russ Vote is the mastermind of Donald Trump's devastating funding freeze. For years, he's been the #1 cheerleader of the idea that Trump should just ignore Congress, ignore our laws, and unilaterally block funding that the American people count on. He took this idea for a spin last time he was Trump's OMB director, helping Trump illegally hold up security assistance. He's written a lot about it in the years since. And when he came before all of us last week, he refused time after time to simply commit to following the law and getting fund out to the communities that all of us represent. And now we've all seen what Vote's grand scheme to lock away funding communities need looks like in practice. You know what makes absolutely no sense? Confirming the mastermind of the last few days of chaos to oversee our country's budget again.
Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State, joining other Democratic members of the Senate Budget Committee at a news conference, part of their boycott of today's committee business meeting on whether OMB Director nominee Russell Vote should be approved, and all the Republicans attended and voted yes, and the nominee was approved, 11-0. The committee chair, Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, writing on X, "I was very pleased that Russ Vote was reported out of the Budget Committee unanimously by those in attendance, all Republicans. My Democratic colleagues decided to boycott, which is their right. The markup was short and pleasant. They were missed, sort of." That was the post from Senator Lindsey Graham. Wall Street today, the Dow up 168, NASDAQ up 49, S&P up 31. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, and get the stories making the headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.